Yes, there were always, quote unquote, beef between people and things like that. But all in all, I think we all had somewhat of a similar background. We were all international. We all came from different places of the world. We were all in Japan together. And for the overwhelming majority of the time, we all got along with each other. I think that was something really special. You don't actually really experience anywhere else. At least I haven't. I went to college. I had a fantastic time in college, but it's not like I know everybody in my college, right? We're talking, a few thousand students as opposed to 400 in high school. And so that was, I think, really, really good.
Welcome to the 59th episode of Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Today, our guest was born and raised in Tokyo. He attended ASIJ from Nursery Kindergarten and graduated in 2003. He completed his undergraduate degree in Boston, then received his master's in London. After working in top capital cities like New York, London, and Tokyo in finance for Lehman Brothers and medical devices for Boston Scientific, he joined his family business, which owns several distributions for international health and beauty brands. In 2017, he started ERTH, a nature-derived, efficacious, and minimalistic skincare brand for healthy mochi-skin. Using ingredients backed by studies from reputable universities like Kindai University and Oxford University, ERTH combines the Japanese way of life with cutting-edge technology, proprietary ingredients including Japanese White Turmeric, which grows only on the brand farms in the Kyushu region of Japan. Outside of work, his interests lie in fitness, horticulture, particularly succulent and cacti, and won't miss an opportunity to have a coffee or a cigar. Welcome to the podcast, Shinji.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
So it's great to see you.
It's been a long time, huh? I haven't seen you probably since high school or maybe even beginning of college in the summer or something.
Yeah, it's been about 20 years. It's long when you put it that way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Good to see you've been doing well, though. ERTH, and we'll talk a bit about skincare. And time allows at the end, I am quite interested about the whole Scotch whiskey. I know from your Instagram, you're quite the.
Yeah, I have a bad habit of just buying bottles and not drinking them, though. That's
where do those bottles go?
They're actually here. They just sit on the counter because I don't really drink alone, or I don't really drink much at home. I actually don't know why I buy so many bottles because I don't drink it that much.
So, well, that's something good that we'll all know. So maybe ASIJ grads can maybe have a big party at your place sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care of that problem. So we'll go in a chronological order, sort of a nice way to sort of keep things in line. And I was wondering first if you could just tell us a bit about your family background and why did your folks decide to send you to an international school, specifically ASIJ?
Well, my father's side, Yamasaki family, is he's full Japanese, but quite an international family, an extended family on that side as well. Growing up, most of his cousins spoke English or were educated in the UK, and this is back in he was born in 1943, so it's quite different, I guess, for a Japanese family, and even. Actually, for our on that side of the family, whenever we get family reunions, we have a lot of international marriages. So we have a Dane, Norwegian, Peruvian, Singaporean, Korean, Canadian now, and Indian, of course, with my mother. So it's quite a international Japanese family to begin with. And on my mother's side, my mother, as I said, she's half Indian, half Japanese. My grandmother was actually Japanese. And my aunt is actually also an ASIJ grad. I guess my mother demanded that I go to ASIJ to my father's, and that's kind of how it began.
That's really interesting that you guys have such a rich history of being an international family. It seems like today you just see so many more mixed kids, right? Just,
absolutely.
You mentioned your grandmother was Japanese, and then your grandma on the other side, and then your grandfather was Indian.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you feel like that quarter part of you, was that very prevalent in the household?
I guess on my mother's side, it was pretty prevalent. They considered themselves a almost fully Indian family, not half Japanese, half Indian. I know Nady Bakes and Mikey Stevens are gonna comment on this, so I am going to say this one thing. Technically, yes, my grandfather is from what is now Pakistan. So, but that was before the partitions, and after the partition, he stayed in India. Therefore, he had an Indian nationality. But the city where he's from, which is Peshawar, is in Pakistan now.
Interesting.
But anyway, yeah. So I think that being foreigners in Japan at that time, I believe they came over in the 60s. So obviously, there aren't that many foreigners to begin with, let alone many Indians. So I think the Indian identity was kept very strong on purpose. It was almost, to as kind of, well, yeah, I mean that it was part of their identity, and it was something that they felt stronger being away from that. So when I was growing up, it was definitely, it didn't quite register to me that my grandmother was actually Japanese. It was, the Japanese family, which is my father's family, and the Indian family in my head, and that genuinely is what it was like.
You bring up a great point about when you are like a minority, I feel like your identity you feel it stronger. I could definitely relate to that. When I'm in Japan, I'm like Amerikajin, like I'm like, represent. But the moment I'm like in Korea, or I'm in the States, I'm like, I'm Nihonjin, like it's very strong suddenly. Whereas I don't feel very Japanese all of a sudden when I'm in Tokyo. Do you feel similar, having lived in places like Tokyo and London?
Actually not so much. I guess I don't feel very strongly Japanese either. Even being in Japan, I think, because I come from a very mixed background, so there wasn't like traditional Japanese family. So very obviously very, I guess, westernized, very mixed, very multicultural. Obviously going to ASIJ as well, right? All the people that I knew until I went to college, we were all from all over the place, different backgrounds, but similar situations. But living in, when I was, I went to school in Boston, working in New York or London. Not really. I didn't feel like any more Japanese come out. But also you could see other Asians in those cities.
Good point. And having lived in those three locations, I mean, I know now we see cities like Shanghai, it's not a city, but Singapore is on the rise. I guess they've always been on the rise last 20 years, but it seems like it always comes back to Tokyo, New York, and London. So having lived in all three of those locations, if there are any younger alumni watching, what would you say are the prominent sort of similarities and differences you've noticed having lived in all three of those capitals? Well, not capitals, but cities.
Man, that's hard. I think similarities, I would say it's a big city, and especially at that age that I was basically outside of Tokyo until around 30. They're good cities to be in. They're fun. It's there's people from all over the world. New York, both in New York and in London, you'll meet new people all the time. Great food, great nightlife scene, easy to travel from those places as well. So in that sense, there's definitely those similarities. But yeah, they're both exciting in different ways. I am more partial to New York, to be frank, than London. I had a great time in London. I was there for 5 years. But it's not a city that I would really think about living again.
What do you
Personally.
think? What do you think puts New York sort of a notch above London?
Well, New York is definitely 24 hours, which I realized London is not after living there.
Mm,
Most places will close by 10.
really?
Yeah.
Is that illegal?
I'm excluding like, nightclubs and stuff like that. But,
Mm,
like the stores and restaurants, they usually don't go that long. And obviously, if the more central London you are, the longer they do stay open.
mm,
But even then, it's, the moment you step outside, slightly outside, it's all closed. Which, I mean, in New York City, it's just all 24 hours all the time.
mm.
And New York definitely has an energy in the air that I feel London didn't have. Like,
Interesting.
I could walk New York up and down, no problems. It was just, it's just a great feeling. People were always doing something, always getting somewhere. And there's just a buzz in New York. In London, not so much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how would Tokyo fit into that sort of competition?
Oh, yeah. I think, for me, Tokyo's number. Oh, man, I'm going to this, aren't I? Tokyo's probably number 2 or number 3. New York is still number 1 for me. It's just that kind of place. It's always exciting and things. But Tokyo is, I think, also because I'm from Tokyo. Right? So it doesn't have the excitement that New York or London did being an outsider living there. Born and raised in Tokyo, it's like nothing's really new. Nothing is that exciting. It's fun, yes, of course, but there's no freshness to it. It's almost like, you've kind of done and seen everything. And not to mention, Tokyo is, 95 or more than 95% Japanese, right? So there isn't that mix of cultures and backgrounds that you would find in London or New York in Tokyo.
Yeah, that's definitely a point that I was hoping you'd touch upon, that sort of difference of homogeneous versus heterogeneous cultures. And it is a weird sort of anomaly almost, right? Where all these other cities just are quite heterogeneous, and then you just have Japan that's like you said.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the exact statistics are, but it's definitely
I think nationally, I think it's like 99 or 98% Japanese.
Wow.
I know it's grown a little more. Like when we were in high school, I think the statistic was like even less than that. It was like 99.5% Japanese or something. So there was like no foreigners.
Yeah, there wasn't many. It was basically all the
people. Exactly. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was talking to a few guys from St. Mary's and Sacred Heart and things the other day that are still in Tokyo, and just the number of tourists and foreigners we saw last year, because this is pre-corona I'm talking about, was insane. It was just like, it was very strange to see that, because like you said, when we were growing up, if you saw a foreigner, chances are they were people you knew directly, or their family members, or had some sort of connection to one of the schools. There was some connection that you could recognize them, chances are. But now it wasn't like it, or it hasn't been like that. And so I looked up the statistics, and apparently the year that I graduated, 2003, the number of tourists in Japan was 4 million. And I believe 2018 or 2019, maybe 2019, it was 40 million. So that's a huge increase, right?
It makes sense now. All the, you just see so many more foreign faces. And that's why this whole coronavirus has just been really, it's sort of a double whammy for Japan. There's so much, energy in that tourist industry.
Yeah. I mean, the tourism industry, I guess, in Japan was already quite established because domestic tourism was quite big, right? And then when the international tourists came in, I think that really, I mean, Japan made an effort for that as well. But it also kind of, there has been some backlash due to that as well in certain areas because it was just overrun.
I use, is that sort of the sort of nationalistic, you mean like movements that are taking place, or
No, I wouldn't say nationalistic. It's just the fact that there were too many tourists in a small area. So like if you take Kyoto, for example, it was packed with tourists. And you could feel that a lot of the locals had enough. Not necessarily because they were not being like xenophobic or anything. It's just they would leave their house and it's literally full of tourists. Like getting around Kyoto is a pain, or was a pain, simply because the number of people there were all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair assertion when you have like 1,000% increase, right? You said 4 million to 40. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a tourist city at all. In that
exactly.
Time. And you have this background of your family's business, and you're taking over the mantle, and I'm at least through your own projects, and I imagine eventually completely. And one thing I was curious was, you have this background working in New York and London for, companies like Lehman Brothers and I think it was Boston Pharmaceuticals.
Boston Scientific.
Sorry, Boston Scientific. At any point, did you sort of think, I don't really want to, go into the healthcare industry and I want to go a totally other route? Or was it always sort of the plan that?
No, it was never the plan, actually. To be quite frank, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do graduating high school. I had no idea what I wanted to do sophomore year in college, and senior year, obviously at sophomore, you have to decide what your major is going to be, right? So I chose marketing and international studies. And when I graduated, I basically applied to a whole bunch of different things and tried to get, both shomen and uraguchi. And then thankfully I landed a great job for a marketing guy at Lehman Brothers. I was in the marketing department, covering fixed income. And no, I started with equities. Sorry.
So you had no idea we wanted to do high school, college. I mean, I think that's most people. But then, so you're in finance. So for a while, you were basically, so it wasn't actually, so I totally misconstrued, based on your background of having worked with, Boston, I keep saying Boston, not pharmaceutical, Boston Scientific and stuff. I was like, okay, it was probably all planned. But then how did you end up then with, I know we're kind of going a little bit forward than I planned, but how did ERTH then begin in 2017? What was sort of the lead up to that?
Well, so I joined the family business in, I want to say 2011. So I've been with the company for almost 10 years now. Wow, 10 years. And at the time, I was still living in London because we have a lot of partners in Europe. And when I was there, we were starting a lot of new business with European companies. So I was actually traveling quite a bit within Europe, Switzerland, Germany, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, where all of these companies are, and building a relationship with these people and building a long-term partnership. And then I came back to Japan, and Japanese sales or Japanese business is not really my thing. It's not my specialty, first of all. It's although I've lived here until I was 18, kind of mentality is very different, right?
How that's not where from sort of the Western.
Well, very, very katai. Very, very regimented, very, I don't want to say they're square, but it's kind of like, it is what it is. kind of mentality, free flow of ideas, discussions, these things just not commonplace. And I actually first realized that, not in my company, but when I was working for Boston Scientific in Tokyo. So that was my first kind of experience working for a company in Japan after I graduated college. After I graduated college, I was in Lehman. We all know what happened at Lehman. So came back to Japan in 2009 or 10. No, 9. And that was my first experience going to an office full of Japanese. And although it was an American company, the inside was all Japanese, right? So even small things like where you're supposed to stand in the elevator was like, what? You know, I had never even realized that was a thing. Being, you know, at the very bottom of the totem pole, I am not allowed to stand in certain areas in the elevator.
Oh wow, I wasn't even aware of that either. Even though I
right?
was,
like it's
that's super. Like, it seems so ineffective. Just these,
right.
Like,
so it's very structured, and there's certain things you're supposed to do, and nobody knows why it's like that. So after working at Boston Scientific here, I worked for a bit in London, went to grad school, and then started at my family business. So when I came back to Tokyo in 2021, I want to say 2015, 14. Sorry, I should have looked this up before.
All right,
2015, something like that.
Yeah,
approximately, something like that. Yeah. It was definitely it took me a while to adapt, which is, I mean, it took me a while to adapt when I was at Boston Scientific, but I knew I was always going to go to the UK. So I kind of gamanshita. And, you know, and then after a year or so, I went to the UK, to London. But when I came back here, it took about a year and a half to 2 years for me to get comfortable with my day-to-day of being in Japan. But sorry, so we went off on a little bit of a tangent there. But so the whole reason why we started ERTH was the Japanese market is not my strengths. Our company has guys who know that inside and out and have been in the industry for decades. So as a kind of side project, I said, okay, well, where are my strengths? I can bring probably Japanese elements outside of Japan. And so that's kind of how we started. Went to Singapore looking for an opportunity in Singapore. Very, very lucky and very grateful that I met my current partners now at that time. And we started our company. We launched our product in 2017, October 2017.
So when you say, these Japanese elements of this product you guys produce, I mean, so what this thing about the proprietary ingredients of Japanese white turmeric.
Yep.
I'm not really aware of this. What is the Japanese name and stuff of this product from Kyushu?
It's a shiroko.
Oh, shiroko.
So yeah, so white turmeric. But we actually have a patent on it, and it's a very, very unique type of turmeric. It only grows on our farm. It genuinely only grows on our farm. And we're the only ones that has it. And we've been, so our company the Japanese side of the company has been supporting and researching into this turmeric for almost 20 years now through Kindai University. And as it turns out, the Japanese white turmeric, as well as the Japanese spring turmeric, so we have patents on 2 different turmerics, are fantastic for skincare, for your skin health. So we based products on that. So it's a very unique compound, very unique ingredients. It's just extracted, natural, of course, and it gives fantastic results. And throughout the research, obviously, we've started this. The first iteration was in cosmetics, but we've now recently, past few years, have discovered that it's actually fantastic for your joints if you take it ingestible. So we actually have a joint supplement as well, based on the Japanese white turmeric. It's called Turmeron Joint, and we're selling it in Singapore and Japan and the US right now.
And this whole thing with skincare, all right, so I want to shift over now a bit to hobbies. You have quite the Instagram following.
I don't know about that. I put a bunch of random things up there. So
we can talk a bit about the random things. We mentioned, I don't even know if it was on air or off air, a bit about Scotch, whiskey, and cigars.
Yep.
It seems like, some people in the ASIJ community really get into cigars. I was not one of them. Yeah, it seems like, I don't know if it's sort of the rareness or sort of like, it kind of is, I guess, a luxury item. So what got you into cigars in the first place?
Funny thing you asked that. I was talking about this with some of my fellow cigar guys. There's a group of us at TAC, actually. And we get together and we smoke together and things like that. But I can't remember the first cigar that I had. Most of them could. I couldn't remember. So that probably means I probably had it when I was in Roppongi or some place, But yeah, so it's like probably like since high school, and then every once in a while, but I started really getting into it after I moved back to Japan after London, towards the tail end of London and coming to Japan, I guess. So in London, I was smoking towards the tail end a little more pipes more. And then when I came to Japan, I kind of switched more to cigars. It definitely, I think from an outside, it has this image, especially in Japan, of it being a luxury item. And in Japan it is, I would say, because they're just stupidly priced. But it's actually not, they're not expensive. If you're in the States, you go to, you just type in cigar stores online. And for you, there are a few brands like Arturo Fuente and things like that, where a stick is, $5. So they're not that, of course there are ones that are very, very expensive. But you don't have to pay a lot for a good cigar.
I think what's really interesting with cigars is the image, right? I was actually just thinking about when LeBron James, right, the basketball player, won the championship, was 4 or 5 months ago, he was smoking a cigar. And I think it's sort of a good segue into your other major sort of hobby. And, we've talked about whiskey and cigars, which don't seem like the healthiest, right? hobbies to, indulge in.
Well, it's all about the frequency that it happens, right?
That's true. Yeah. It's not like you drink whiskey every night and smoke cigars every night. The other, hobby that you're quite intense about is weightlifting. So when did this begin? And, how do you sort of maintain this? I hesitate to call it a hobby because it seems more like a lifestyle. It kind of reminds me of
the cliche of it being a lifestyle, right? Yeah. You're talking about
there was a guest a few episodes ago who was like a runner, but like we're not talking about runner like me who runs 10K. It was like, oh, he runs 100K. So it's kind of like, it's like, how do you be a lawyer and at the same time run 100K? And it was interesting talking to him about that. So I'm kind of interested, from you being the CEO, very busy guy, also with the whiskey and cigars. Like, how do you maintain the lifestyle of essentially lifting weights quite extensively?
My frequency has gone down, definitely. But I've changed my way of training. So I don't think I could train more than I do now. My body would be able to handle it. I started, strength training, Severs, ASIJ Severs. That was the beginning. in a way, because I don't know if you recall, I was a pretty tubby kid, right? So I was, center of the football team, not a very good one, but I was still the center of the football team.
I remember you were on
at
the
the
football
time.
team. Yeah.
Yeah. But so like when I joined football, I think sophomore year, I was, bordering 90 kilos. So that's all fat, right? I was not particularly muscular. I was not muscular in any way at that point. But then I guess I kind of got sick of it, of being at that weight. And I lost a lot of it between the summer of sophomore year and junior year. And by the time I graduated, I was like 62 kilos or something. But I've always enjoyed training.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed training and going to the gym, working out and exercising and things like that. I wish I knew then what I know now, because I feel I would be a lot bigger now had I known and done what I should have been doing, which I wasn't. But now I just train 6 times a week. 3 times a week.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
No, it's just just 3 times a week. I used to train 6 times a week.
I mean, so with 6 times a week, are we talking about personal trainers? Is there a gym a few minutes away? I mean, how does one keep?
No, I used to just go to the gym. In college, I was going to the gym, 6 days a week. Afterwards, in New York, when I started working at Lehman, I admit not so much. A lot of partying and drinking took precedence at that time. But after that, when I moved back to Tokyo, since then, I've probably been going to the gym at least, 3 times a week. So for over, almost 10 years or something.
Wow. So it all started with Coach Severs.
Yeah, absolutely. I
wonder if that course is still around,
I believe it is. I mean, Severs, unfortunately, is no longer there, but.
Yeah, I guess someone's got to take over. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah. I was, believe it or not, in that class too, but I was always they had 4 groups, and I was always in the
right.
And I might have gone to the second group like a little bit for about 2 weeks, and I was just like, I don't know. I think I might have been like, I was in a group I shouldn't have been in. That's the worst thing you could do with strength training, because it just,
Yeah, true.
So, before we wrap it up, while we're on the topic of ASIJ, is there anything about ASIJ that sticks out to you the most when you think back to your time there? We talked a bit about American football, strength training.
I guess the friendships, and in that sense, like the social elements of ASIJ. Yes, there were always, quote unquote beef between people and things like that. But all in all, I think we all had somewhat of a similar background. We were all international. We all came from different places of the world. We were all in Japan together. And for the overwhelming majority of the time, we all got along with each other. I think that was something really special. You don't actually really experience anywhere else. At least I haven't. I went to college. I had a fantastic time in college, but it's not like I know everybody in my college, right? We're talking, a few thousand students as opposed to 400 in high school. And so that was, I think, really, really good.
And does a lot of those friendships survive the many years, especially through social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to, a few of the guys from our group quite often. We have a chat on WhatsApp, and, obviously I see a lot of people on Facebook. Well, not so much Facebook, because I very rarely use Facebook itself, but on Instagram and things like that. I see them, or just comments and things like that. So I think social media is definitely, as much as flack that it gets in the media or in things, I think it's a great tool for people like us who are really scattered all over the globe, just to keep in contact. Even if we don't talk to each other, at least we kind of know what's going on with everyone. And I think that's a really great thing.
I strongly agree that like there's those people that you might not talk to, but at least it's nice to know, oh, they're married, oh, they got 2 kids, as opposed to not seeing them for 20 years and then having to catch up like
Exactly.
for 20 years worth. That's a great point. Social media does get flack, but it does really help people like us who are sort of global nomads. And, on that note, I want to move on to the final point, which is I like to ask the guest at the end what is coming up in their lives the next few years, next few decades. So you could tell us what is to come.
Oh, what is to come? I guess kids eventually, having the wedding, hopefully by the end of the year after all this pandemic is over. Business, I have a few projects in the works for ERTH, a few product launches. We're actually launching a new product. I don't know when this is airing, but on the 4th.
You mean like in 2 days?
In 2 days.
Okay. I'm like, it just came out a few days ago.
Okay. It just came out a few days ago. Yeah. And throughout this year, we have a few other projects. We just opened up a new shop at Tang's in Singapore, which is a really big milestone for us. And so we're hoping to keep that going. Few other business projects that are kind of in the back of my head that I'm trying to see if it can come to fruition. Hopefully it can. But yeah, I guess, and of course, keep lifting and having whiskeys and cigars.
A lot going on in the personal front and professional front.
Yes,
Wish you the best of luck in both.
Thank you very much.
And the item has come out.
Has come out now. Yeah, has come out. Right.
We can maybe put in a little linky thing in the.
Yeah, it would be great. It's a hand cream. It's a completely different type of hand cream. Not sticky at all. Really, really nourishing. And fantastic for us these days because we're washing our hands so often and disinfecting our hands with alcohol and things like that.
Great point.
So yeah.
So that was episode 59, Tokyo Alumni Podcast. Thank you, Shinji, for being with us.
Thanks a lot, Nick.